From Montana's news leader, this is the MTN Noon News.
Good afternoon, I'm Augusta McDonnell. Miller Robson has our forecast in just a few, but first let's get right to our top story. A welcome home party in Dillon for a pair of men pardoned in the January 6th Capitol riot was met with its own protests. MTN's John Amy was in Dillon Friday evening to find out what protesters had to say.
A welcome home party was held for two people in Dillon who were pardoned for their role in the January 6th riot at the nation's capital. Well, a group of protesters gathered outside the party, and they certainly were not giving them a warm welcome.
The fact of the matter is, the man committed a crime against us.
And was found guilty.
And was found guilty.
About 30 protesters gathered across the street from Mac's Last Cast Bar recently, where a party was held for Hank Munzer and Isaac Sturgeon. Munzer and Sturgeon were among the 1,500 people pardoned by President Trump last month. Munzer received a 2-year sentence, and Sturgeon was sentenced to 6 years for storming the Capitol in 2021.
I cannot stay at home knowing that these two boys were in the Capitol wrecking it, and that's just totally abhorrent to me.
Munzer said he respected the crowd's right to protest.
We're just celebrating for me and Isaac, being out of jail and stuff like that from a presidential pardon. And then you got people that are triggered by the whole thing because they don't understand what's really going on.
Dillon resident Rob Thomas said he and his wife organized the protest to let people know that not everyone in town supports the pardons.
I am not good with the pardon, and because that to me says that it's okay to beat up cops and we're going to pardon you for beating up cops, and I'm not okay with that.
In Dillon, John Amy, MTN News.
Well, for much of the state, it's turning out to be a beautiful start to the final week of February. Man, the year is screaming by. A couple shots around the state here. It's a great shot of the blue sky there in Great Falls, looking fantastic. In Butte as well. Also, a fair share of sunshine in Billings, too. Of course, with these warmer temperatures and the sunny skies, the snowmelt is an issue with some flooding in spots. We'll talk about that coming up. Really a big story today. The gusty winds. Look at those temperatures today, and the winds helping that too. Some of that downslope flow giving us temperatures right now in the 40s in some areas, already into the 50s. And I mentioned the winds very strong, especially up and down the Rocky Mountain front and moving east. We'll take a look at that coming up with the main forecast.
Montana's film industry, an economic driver in the state, could be in danger. Hundreds of Montanans work on a variety of other productions besides Yellowstone. Our Cassidy Powers explains why some of those jobs could be in jeopardy.
Lights, camera, action. That's a phrase that when most people hear, they think Hollywood. But did you know here in Montana, we actually have hundreds of people that work in the film industry, but currently they're in jeopardy of losing their jobs and being displaced.
The last movie I worked on was called Needleman, written and directed by a guy who's born and raised in Gallatin Gateway. It's surprising how big the film community here is in Montana.
If you ever have questions about Montana's film industry, Mallory Regan is the person to talk to. She moved to Bozeman 10 years ago to be a wedding photographer until
a friend of mine approached me and said, if you're crazy enough to like weddings, you might be crazy enough to want to work on movies with us.
Now she's the owner of 40 Watt, a Bozeman-based production company. Mallory's worked on a number of film sets around Montana, mostly taking on producing roles.
I have worked on movies that have a budget of like $3.5 million or more, where everything is coming from Montana. So that's all of the technicians, the camera people, the lighting people.
By keeping productions local, that money gets filtered back into Montana's economy. In fact, according to the Montana legislature, in the last 2 years, film production in Montana has brought in over $312 million to local economies statewide. But this industry is in jeopardy.
When a production comes to Montana, the money that gets spent here stays here, right? When they're bringing crews in from out of state, they're spending money that's going to leave when they leave.
In 2019, 2019, the Montana legislature passed the Media Act to provide an income tax incentive applicable to any media production, including those coming in from out of state.
Tell the world what happens when they call.
Which has been successful, but maybe a little too successful.
Because of the success and the huge amount of productions that have come through, we're actually out of tax credits till 2029. So we're in this place where we have hundreds of Montana filmmakers who are looking at getting displaced.
Lynn Wood is the executive director of the Montana Media Coalition, who created the Media Act. She tells me here in Montana, there's been 167 productions over the last year and a half. But it's been the few large productions, such as Yellowstone, who bring in the out-of-state crews and dry up the tax credits. The result for our local crews?
We're looking at about $75 million of lost wages for Montana. We pretty much will lose our industry in the state potentially.
So what is being done?
And so in 2025, we want to amend it. We want to reserve 60% for Montana businesses and productions
to help keep the film industry in Montana alive.
We want this to be for Montana filmmakers telling Montana stories. So by Montana for Montana.
Because if this bill is passed, it would not only save thousands in economic revenue, but hundreds of workers from being displaced.
To see those people be out of work or have to leave or have to, choose a different career is heartbreaking. So yeah, I want the money to stay in Montana, but more importantly, I want the people to stay.
For more information on this new film tax incentive, visit our website. In Bozeman, Cassidy Powers, MTN News.
In today's Leading Look, the trial of a former Billings group home worker accused of killing a disabled resident set to begin today in Yellowstone County. Dante Garriott faces a charge of deliberate homicide after allegedly beating to death a resident in February of last year. The victim was taken to the hospital on the evening of February 4th and later died from his injuries. Now, more than a year later, the trial is set to begin this week, with jury selection scheduled to begin today. And a Colorado woman who went missing in Missoula is now presumed to have drowned in the Clark Fork River. 33-year-old Denise Ehrlich went missing on Friday near the University of Montana in the area of the Jacobs Island Dog Park. The Missoula Police Department says they'll continue to search for Ehrlich's body as conditions allow and remain committed to bringing closure to her family. And a popular Montana landmark near Red Lodge is receiving new life. Mount Maurice, situated in the Beartooth Mountains, burned during the Robertson Draw Fire of 2021. That fire scorched 30,000 total acres in June of that year. But now, nearly 4 years later, and from thousands of feet in the air, one aircraft is sprucing up Mount Maurice for the summer. Last week, a crew from Sterling, Colorado was contracted by the Bureau of Land Management to reseed the mountain, which 1/3 of the total land burned belonged to. One Kalispell tree farm isn't quite what you'd expect. Tibetan yaks help keep the forest acres healthy and prepped for wildfire. The Montana Ag Network's Emily Brown takes us to the Springbrook Ranch.
Montana has more than 600 tree farms, covering over 237,000 acres of land. These tree farmers do more than you might expect.
They are good forest stewards. They care about the land that they sit on.
To be certified by the American Tree Farm System, the tree farmer must own 10 or more woodland acres and have a management plan to keep their forests healthy and growing quality trees.
A managed forest is often called a tree farm, but it doesn't mean it's in little straight rows of trees.
And every year, each state selects an outstanding tree farmer of the year. In 2023, Montana's winners were Jim Watson and his partner Carol.
Once somebody's won the local state Tree Farmer of the Year award, if they get elevated up to the Western Regional Tree Farmer, which Jim ended up winning.
Watson isn't your typical farmer.
I'm a tree hugger that carries a chainsaw.
His nearly 1,700 acres are home to a diverse population of trees.
And our focus is on forest restoration and wildlife habitat and having a good, healthy, resilient forest.
Trees at Springbrook are thinned and spaced to keep diversity.
We did a lot of understory work, cleaning out understory and small trees that weren't thriving. We wanted to remove the worst and leave the best.
Watson does all this work.
She just loves attention.
With the help of a herd of Tibetan yaks.
We're still grazing yaks, but that helps reduce the grass fuel load. It helps with wildfire, but it also helps with general forest management.
And limiting fuels reduces a bigger threat.
So we're guarding against wildfire, so we don't want the trees crowded too close together, because then if a big fire comes through, it can run through the crowns.
Watson's property has the seal of approval from fire management organizations like the U.S. Forest Service and DNRC.
He has islands of fuels where trees are kind of pocketed together, but again, there's that large space in between where that fire intensity is able to drop down, and that flame length then will also and be a more approachable and safer to access fire.
Yeah, that's like a great situation to walk into, or it's a great hand to be dealt as a firefighter.
For Watson, being a tree farmer and using the program's resources have set the course for the rest of his days.
There's more to do every day than possibly can be done, so I just pick and choose what I enjoy.
In Kalispell, Emily Brown, MTN News.